The first bark came at 3:17 a.m., sharp enough to slice the October dark. Max, a 12-year-old golden retriever who had never once barked at the moon, stood rigid on the frost-rimmed lawn of the Harper place, nose pointed at the ancient sugar maple that had shaded 4 generations. The tree was dying, everyone in Willow Creek knew it. Black knots bulged from the trunk like tumors, and the city had taped an orange X on the bark weeks ago, condemned. Old Mrs. Harper, wrapped in her late husband's army coat, shuffled onto the porch. "Maxie, hush now," she whispered, but the dog would not hush. He barked again, deeper, urgent, the sound of a creature who had forgotten he was old. Something inside the tree was moving. By dawn the whole block was awake. Phones glowed against bedroom windows. Timmy Alvarez, 10 years old and still missing 2 front teeth, filmed on his tablet while his mother called 911. Officer Lena Torres arrived first, coffee sloshing over her cruiser door. She had grown up 3 houses down, she knew Max never lied. When the dog pawed the bark and whined, she radioed for the K9 unit and a chainsaw. The lump sat 8 feet up, the size of a laundry basket, wrapped in what looked like rotted burlap fused to the wood. Sap had crusted over it years ago, sealing it like amber. No one remembered it being there yesterday. Sergeant Mike O'Connell, a man who had cut down more trees than he cared to count, hesitated. "Could be a hornet nest," he warned. Lena shook her head. She had heard Max's bark in her sleep, it sounded like pleading. They started the saw. The first cut released a smell none of them would ever forget: warm milk, cedar shavings, and something metallic, like blood left too long in snow. The second cut widened the seam. A collective inhale rippled through the 20 neighbors now pressed against the police tape. Inside the hollowed trunk lay a child. Not a doll, not a mannequin, a living girl, maybe 5 years old, curled tight as a fern. Her skin was the color of river ice, but her chest rose and fell. A faded quilt, hand-stitched with tiny red cardinals, wrapped her shoulders. Someone's grandmother had sewn that quilt. Someone's grandmother had hidden a child inside a tree. Max sat, tail thumping once, as if to say, "Good, you finally listened." Lena dropped to her knees. The girl's eyelashes fluttered, frost sparkled on them like sugar. "Hey, sweetheart," Lena whispered, voice cracking on every syllable. "You're safe now." The ambulance screamed in. Paramedics swaddled the child in heated blankets while the crowd stood silent, breath fogging the air. Mrs. Harper, 87 and half blind, pushed through the tape. She touched the quilt and began to cry without sound, shoulders shaking like wind in dry leaves. That was the first realization: the quilt was hers. She had sewn it in 1952 for a baby who never came home from the hospital. She had buried the empty quilt in the maple's hollow the night her daughter died, a secret grief no one in Willow Creek ever spoke of again. The second realization came an hour later, in the bright herb where the child opened her eyes. They were the exact wintergreen of Mrs. Harper's long-dead daughter. The DNA test would take days, but the room already knew. Her name, whispered in a voice no louder than moth wings, was Ruth. Ruth Harper. Born 5 winters ago in a women's shelter 2 states away, kidnapped by a father who vanished into the mountains, found by a dog who refused to let an old tree keep its secret. The third realization belonged to Timmy Alvarez. While reporters swarmed the hospital lawn, he slipped back to the maple with a pocketknife and carved a single word into the fresh scar left by the chainsaw: "Listen." By evening the story had wings. CNN, BBC, a Tokyo morning show, everyone wanted the dog, the tree, the miracle child. But Willow Creek closed ranks. They brought casseroles to the Harpers' sagging porch. They strung Christmas lights in November because Ruth had never seen them. They taught Max to ring a sleigh bell with his paw so Ruth could laugh until she hiccuped. Mrs. Harper sat in her rocker, Ruth asleep against her heart, quilt tucked under both their chins. "I thought I buried hope," she told Lena, who had traded her badge for a mug of cocoa. "Turns out hope just needed a louder dog." Lena laughed, then cried, then laughed again. She had come to Willow Creek to escape the city's noise, but noise had followed her home in the form of barking. She decided to stay. She adopted Max when Mrs. Harper's hands grew too stiff to hold the leash. Every dawn they walked past the maple, now wrapped in yellow caution tape that fluttered like prayer flags. Children left dandelions in the hollow. Someone hung a wooden sign: "Ruth's tree. Do not cut, ever." Winter deepened. Ruth learned to skate on the frozen creek behind the school. She called Mrs. Harper, Graham, and Max, Captain. She asked for stories about the tree, and Graham told her the true one, no sugarcoating, just love thick enough to survive 50 years of sap and sorrow. On the night of the first real snowfall, the town gathered under Ruth's tree. Timmy had strung battery fairy lights through the branches. Someone brought a guitar. Someone else brought cider spiced with secrets. Lena stood between Mrs. Harper and Ruth, arms around both, while Max leaned against her knee like a furry heater. They sang, Silent Night, off-key and perfect. Halfway through, Ruth tugged Graham's sleeve. Do trees have hearts? She asked. Graham considered. They have rings, she said. Every ring is a year someone loved them. Ruth pressed her mittened hand to the trunk. Then this one has a new ring tonight. Snow kept falling, soft as forgiveness. Phones stayed in pockets, no one needed proof. They had the dog who barked, the officer who listened, the grandmother who never stopped hoping, and the little girl who taught an entire town how to count rings. When the song ended, Max barked once, clear, proud, final. The sound carried over rooftops, over state lines, over every place where someone had given up on miracles. It said, pay attention. The world is still sewing quilts out of darkness. And somewhere far away, another dog lifted its head, ears pricked toward a tree no one had noticed yet. But that is another story. For now, Willow Creek slept under a sky bright enough to read by. Ruth dreamed of cardinals. Graham dreamed of her daughter's laugh. Lena dreamed of the weight of a child's trust in her arms. And Max, curled on the porch, dreamed of the sound a heart makes when it decides to beat again. If you walk past Ruth's tree at dawn, you can still see the scar where the saw kissed the wood. Touch it gently, it's warm. Inside, a new ring is growing, thin, bright, unbreakable. It is the color of golden fur, of police blue courage, of quilt thread red. It is the color of every stranger who became family the moment a dog refused to stop barking. Listen, the tree is telling you its secret. Kindness is not a feeling. It is a sound. It is a bark in the dark. It is a saw in willing hands. It is a circle that widens every time someone chooses to cut open the hard places and find the living thing inside. Carry the sound with you. One day you will hear it returned. A child's laugh, a neighbor's knock, the soft thud of a tail against hope. And when you do, run toward it. The tree is waiting.